So let's get started with the basic usage of the Blender Toolkit. First, we want to create a mod file for our game. So I'm going to create a new mod file right here. And I'm going to go to my game folder, which I already have in my recent view. So I'm going to go ahead and go to, in my case, D, which is actually just Gary's Mod RTX, RTX Remix, and then we want to go to the mods folder. I already have the folder made, but it's going to call test, and we want to name it mod.usda. Once we do that, we'll create it and load the project, and now we'll just need to import a capture. And for the same thing, if you already have your capture made, you'll just go down here with this little folder icon where it says capture folder, and I'm going to go to my captures folder. Once you have that selected, it's going to populate the list of any captures you've ever had, and I just had the one called test, and I'm going to import that, and I'm going to move my viewport to the camera. I'm going to turn on textures as well, so let me do that. There you go. That's how you import a capture. But next we want to try importing or exporting lights and other entities to our game. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this skybox because it does not work correctly in Blender since it's just a big old box mesh. But as you've noticed, the map lights work. So all the ones that were imported from the game should show up as they would. Yeah. So since our player spawned right here, I want to start with creating a light. So I'm going to move my 3D cursor right here. I'm going to create a point light, move it up, and we're going to set a radius of 0.07 or something. Now, you can't leave it at 0 because the way how RTX Remix works, it expects a value. If you don't give it one, it's going to set a default value that's not going to match. So we're going to leave it at 0.07. I'm going to make the color red, and I want to make it pretty bright so I can see it in game. I'm going to give it about 100 watts. Pretty bright. So once we have that in place, we need to select an anchor object. In my case, for Gary's Mod RTX, we have a anchor mesh. Now I'm not sure why the texture is not showing up, but this is it right here. So I'm gonna, as you saw me, what I just did, I clicked this little dropper icon where it says Remix Anchor Target, and you'll just select that. So now that anything you spawn will be anchored relative to in the game world. So we have this light right here. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure it's the only object selected. I'm going to go under Mesh and Light Exports and press Export Selected to mod.usda. And we're going to go open our game and verify that the changes took place. Okay, so now that we're in game, we might not be in the right spawn, the same spawn point as the anchor, so I'm going to turn on Debug Light Visualization. So yes, it's right over here. So I'm going to turn off Enhanced Materials just to show that it's in the same place as the anchor. So if we go in game, you can see player was right there when we took the capture, lights right here, anchor's there, and it's the same place here. So there we go, there's our light. Now as you've noticed, it's not as bright as it was in Blender Eevee, and this could just be due to the Blender Eevee render not matching Remix. I cannot try cycles at the moment. I don't have, or rather my GPU does not have support for cycles, so it would be hard to work with it with CPU rendering. But anyway, our light works, so we can go ahead and close our game. So now we want to start trying model exports. And the same thing, you just want to put your 3D cursor somewhere and just export your model of choice. So I'm going to go to FBX, and I have a folder called Stuff to Import, and I have this Chinese T table. So I'm going to move that to my 3D cursor. There is the model. Now something to note with imported assets is that we have a couple choices of how we want our materials to be. So I'm going to go ahead and move these nodes here just so it's easier to work with. By default, anything you import will be Principled BSDF, that is the standard Blender material. But if you go down to RTX Remix, we have two node groups. We have Aperture Opaque for your normal stuff, and then Translucent for like glass that's refracted and stuff. So for example, we can create a Aperture Opaque material, and this will disconnect all material inputs except for those two for some reason. I'll have to fix that. But I'm going to go ahead and reconnect the albedo texture or diffuse texture. As you can see, it looks just like it did with Principled, and that is because it uses Principled underneath, but it has all the normal options you'd expect out of the official NVIDIA Remix Toolkit. So except animation doesn't work, and pretty much everything that's great out here does not work right now. So that might be fixed in the future. It's more just about what Blender can render versus what the Remix, I guess, Toolkit can handle. So yeah. Anyway, once you have that single mesh selected, you'll do the same thing as lights and click export selected to mod.usda. And depending on the asset, or assets plural, if you want to do a batch export, that might take a little longer. Unfortunately, as much as I've tried to do background processing, it will freeze up Blender if you're doing a whole bunch of heavy assets. But anyway, since that is now exported, we are going to go back in game and see if our table shows up. Okay. Oh, there it is. So, just like the light, if we uncheck Enhanced Materials, you'll see it's in the same place that where it was in Blender. It matches up. I think our light's still there. You can kind of see the sheen of it. But yeah, there it is, and that's models. So let's move on to material exports. Now I'm going to choose something existing in the capture that isn't, well, obvious. So we're going to do this piece of graffiti right here. So I'm going to delete this existing material, and I'm going to go back to our stuff to import folder, and I just have a simple file that says hi, just made in MS Paint. So for anything that's inside the, or pre-existing in the capture, it's going to by default use the aperture opaque material, just because this is what the official toolkit would use, so that's why it's the default. But once you have made your texture replacement and, or connect other inputs such as roughness, metallic, displacement, or normals, after you have all that hooked up, you'll just go to material exports and making sure the captured asset is selected, and press export selected to mod.usda. And I left my game open, so that might actually break it, so I'm going to uncheck this checkbox called reuse existing textures. This is mostly used if you're batch exporting something that already uses the same texture and you don't want the texture processor to already re-export it. But I'm going to turn that off because the game might have not let me write the texture replacement since I had it open. Okay, so all our previous changes should still show up. Yep. If we go down here, I can already see it. There is our replacement. And that's pretty much it. That's the basic usage of the Blender Toolkit.